Imagine you're transported back 100,000 years into the middle of the woods. There are no great empires. There are no human civilizations. All you have is you, your extended family, maybe some friends, 10 to 100 people at most, and there may be some other tribes you've met, but you don't really have any relationship with. In this ancient tribal sort of economic system, there's no real exchange, because the way that labor is exchanged between individuals is it's taken from the individual and contributed to a collective cause. So it's not like you're trading with your mom where, you bring the lumber and she brings the berries. No, it's actually that you're doing that on behalf of the collective. So there doesn't need to be an exchange between family members or friends like that. As those tribes grow and you have more and more people, larger populations, and differing economic needs, other sorts of economic systems begin to develop, where you now have a situation where you need to trade with people that you don't actually know. So you need to actually trade with those other tribes. And maybe your tribe has access to a great source of tin, and their tribe has access to a great source of a particular kind of plant. And so you develop an ad hoc trade system where you notice that if you give this, they're happy to give that, and you don't have to go to war with each other over it. However, there's probably still a lot of war going on. Now, that ad hoc trade system is a big development over just being in a family where you're only contributing to your collective cause. Because now you can actually trade, and you have the opportunity to get access to all sorts of resources and opportunities and economies of scale that you didn't have before. Now you can begin to focus on, well, now I can extract more and more tin and trade for a little bit more of what I need to subsist. But as these ad hoc currencies develop over time, they tend to whittle down towards the lowest common denominator, which is really something like precious metals. And eventually, we know, in most areas of the world, actually is precious metals. So originally, any kinds of metals would be considered precious because just look around, they're not that easy to come by in most places. But over time, even that became more and more watered down to its lowest common denominator, basically silver, gold, copper, a couple of other metals. And as societies began to develop and real civilizations and actually city-states began to emerge, they began to have these precious metals minted into coins. And at the beginning of the existence of coins and standardized currencies, there was still a lot of uncertainty involved in this. Every city might have a different currency. You might have to go and actually weigh the coin just to verify that it's the right weight for what you're trading for. Someone might have watered it down. They might have put a less precious metal into it and then wrapped that less precious metal in a sheath of gold or silver, whatever you're trading with, to make it so that you think that you're getting a good deal, but you're actually getting metal that's much less valuable than what you're trading for it. So over the course of the evolution of currency and standardized currency, that has come more and more into control. And if you've ever wondered why your local government might have something like a department of weights and measures, that's because even up till a few hundred years ago, there wasn't really an expectation that you could necessarily go anywhere and have a fair, balanced scale. There weren't even measurement systems formal systems until a few thousand years ago. So over time, as the currencies became more and more standardized and more reliable, now we're getting to a point where the state backing of those currencies is sufficient that you don't need the full weight anymore. So you can begin to put less and less gold into that gold coin. Now, maybe you only put 90% gold, and then you put 10% some other metal into the coin. And over time, as you can imagine, the amount of actual gold in that coin becomes less and less. And you're holding all that gold, all that bullion, in a vault somewhere. So there are a lot of advantages to holding the bullion separate from the coins that they're meant to represent the value of, because the bullion then can't be taken by other countries. The coins can't be melted down and traded in foreign markets, and it also allows you to do stuff with that bullion and guard it easily, and maybe even keep your people safer from invaders. But as it got watered down and that precious metal became abstracted and the bullion separated from the coins that represent the value of the bullion, the reserves actually began to shrink. So now the state's putting out more money than the value of the bullion that it's holding in reserve. And this is all, if you want to think about the time frame that this is evolving in, the bullion coin divide, where you had a state-backed currency, began something like a few thousand years ago, and has been a method of exchange that is now transforming into an even more abstracted system where there's actually no bullion backing up the currency. Now you have a paper currency or a coin made of relatively non-precious metal, and there's actually nothing there behind it. All that's behind it is the guarantee of the state that if somebody else comes in and tries to mess with your economy, then they'll use the army to stop them and to make sure that that currency and the debts and other financial instruments involved in that currency are enforceable. And that's where we're getting into modern day capitalist economics, beginning around 300 years ago with the Renaissance and Enlightenment in Europe, where we have more and more trust in the currencies and more trust in the weights and measures that allow us to invest in paper currencies, that allow us to form things like stock markets, bond markets. And as those markets then evolve over time, they become more and more abstract, and during the Nixon administration, we actually switched over formally into a fiat currency, where now not only is the paper currency not backed up by any sort of bullion, we actually print more money than represents the actual productive capacity of the nation backing that money. And in the US fiat currency system, the banks are able to loan out about 10 times as much money as they actually have in deposit. Bring this through, and we're experiencing an even more recent revolution in the way that we do economics, because this fiat currency ushered in a perpetual inflationary growth paradigm where more and more money can be issued, and it's more or less relative to the population, because you can only borrow a certain amount against your productive power as an individual, but the bank is able to provide more and more currency without a hard limitation. If you have a fixed amount of gold bullion, then the price of the gold bullion is going to have an impact on your economy. Whereas with something like a fiat currency, you're able to dynamically manage how much money is in circulation and the value of that currency as well. And this is manifested in the modern day in the form of credit lines and other sorts of electronic and abstract currencies. So the absolute most recent thing, though, is even more recent than this information technology and the credit, which is and the fiat currency, which has come around the last 30 to 50 years. It's actually these online cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin, where you have a currency that is so abstract it's not actually backed by anything. It's actually backed by some sorts of mathematical principles about how advanced your computational capacity on the planet is. I'm not going to go into that in depth. I'm not sure I totally understand how the cryptocurrency works, but that's the history of human economics of the last 100,000 years. Hope you enjoyed, and have a beautiful day.